The stagecoach plunged sideways, wood splintering like gunfire. Ella clutched the seat rail as bodies slammed against her, screaming passengers, the smell of horse sweat, and fear. Then the world went dark. When she opened her eyes, a stranger stood in the rain, his face hidden beneath a hat brim, pulling her from the wreckage without a word. Their hands touched for 3 seconds. That was all. But in a town where silence meant survival and trust could get you killed, those 3 seconds would decide everything. If you're ready to see where fate takes Ella and the mysterious man who saved her life, stay with me until the end. And hey, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see just how far this story travels. The crash came without warning. One moment, the stagecoach rattled along the muddy trail cutting through the Montana wilderness. The next, the lead horse screamed, a high, terrible sound, and the whole rig lurched hard to the left. Ella Hart's fingers dug into the wooden seat as her body lifted off the bench. A woman beside her shrieked. The driver's voice rose above the chaos, cursing and yanking the reins, but it was already too late. The rear axle hit something, a rock, a rut, maybe both, and the coach tilted. Gravity took over. Ella's stomach flipped as the world spun sideways. She saw the ceiling, then the floor, then nothing but a tangle of skirts and elbows and the raw panic of bodies colliding. Her shoulder slammed into the doorframe. Pain shot down her arm. Someone's boot heel caught her ribs. Then came the final bone-rattling impact as the coach hit the ground and rolled once before skidding to a stop on its side. For a moment there was only silence. Heavy, suffocating silence broken by the rain drumming against overturned wood. Ella lay tangled in the wreckage, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Her hat had come off. Her hair stuck to her face, damp with sweat and rain leaking through the cracked roof. She tried to move and immediately regretted it. Her shoulder throbbed. Her ribs ached. But nothing felt broken. "Is anyone hurt?" A man's voice called from somewhere above her. "I can't. My leg's stuck." "Get me out of here." Ella blinked, forcing herself to focus. The coach had landed on its side, the door now above her like a hatch. Through the rain-streaked window, she could see gray sky and the dark outline of pine trees swaying in the wind. The storm had rolled in fast, turning the afternoon into near twilight. She pushed herself up onto her knees, wincing. Around her, the other passengers were scrambling, dazed and panicked. A woman in a blue dress sobbed quietly, clutching her arm. An older man with a thick mustache was trying to pry open the door above them, grunting with effort. "Let me help," Ella said, her voice steadier than she felt. The man glanced down at her, surprised, then nodded. Together they shoved at the door until it gave way with a groan. Rain poured in immediately, cold and sharp. The man climbed out first, then reached back to pull the sobbing woman up. Ella waited her turn, her heart still hammering in her chest. When her turn came, she grabbed the man's hand and let him haul her up onto the side of the overturned coach. The wind hit her like a slap. She steadied herself, blinking against the rain, and took in the scene. The stagecoach lay on its side in the middle of the trail, one wheel still spinning slowly. The horses had been cut loose. She could see them a few yards away, nervous and stamping, but otherwise unharmed. The driver sat on the ground nearby, holding his head and cursing under his breath. Blood trickled from a cut above his eyebrow. And standing in the rain, calm as if he'd been expecting this, was a man she'd never seen before. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat that hid most of his face. Water dripped from the brim as he moved toward the wreckage with the kind of careful, deliberate steps that suggested he knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't speak, didn't shout or ask questions. He just went to work. Ella watched as he helped the last passenger out of the coach, a young boy, maybe 10, who clung to the stranger's arm like a lifeline. The man set the boy down gently, then turned back to assess the damage. "Anyone seriously hurt?" he asked. His voice was low, rough around the edges, but steady. "No," the mustachioed man said. "Shaken up, but we'll live." The stranger nodded once. Then his gaze shifted, sweeping over the group until it landed on Ella. She froze. It wasn't that he stared. It was the way he looked at her, like he was reading something she hadn't meant to write. His eyes were pale, maybe gray or blue, hard to tell in the dim light. His face was weathered, lined in places that spoke of too much sun and not enough sleep. There was a scar along his jawline, faint but visible. He didn't smile, didn't nod, just held her gaze for 3 seconds that felt like 30. Then he looked away. "Storm's getting worse," he said to no one in particular. "Town's 2 miles north. You'll want to move before the trail washes out." "What about the coach?" the driver asked, still holding his head. "Leave it. You can send someone back when the weather clears." The driver muttered something under his breath but didn't argue. The stranger was already walking toward the horses, checking their legs and harnesses with practiced hands. Ella climbed down from the overturned coach, her boots squelching in the mud. Her dress was ruined, soaked through and streaked with dirt, but that was the least of her problems. She approached the stranger carefully, unsure why she felt compelled to say anything at all. "Thank you," she said. He glanced at her briefly, then returned his attention to the horses. "Didn't do much." "You helped. That's more than nothing." He didn't respond, just finished checking the last horse, then straightened and looked toward the dark line of trees to the east. His jaw tightened. "You should get moving," he said. "What about you?" "I'll manage." It wasn't a dismissal exactly, but it was close. Ella felt the distance he was putting between them, deliberate and firm. She should have left it at that, should have turned around and followed the others toward town, but something stopped her. "Do you live around here?" she asked. "Close enough. Will you be all right in the storm?" For the first time, something flickered across his face, surprise maybe, or irritation. He looked at her again, and this time his expression was harder to read. "I'll be fine," he said. "You worry about yourself." Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the rain before she could say another word. Ella stood there for a moment, watching the space where he'd been. The wind tugged at her wet skirts, the cold seeped into her bones. But she barely noticed. All she could think about was the way he'd looked at her, like he'd seen something broken and familiar. "Miss," the mustachioed man called, "we're heading out." She pulled herself together and hurried to join the group. The walk to town was miserable, 2 miles of mud and rain and aching limbs. By the time they reached Dusty Ford, Ella's legs were shaking and her teeth were chattering. The town itself was smaller than she'd expected, just a collection of wooden buildings clustered around a single dirt road. But there was a light in the window of the general store, and smoke rising from a chimney, and that was enough. The driver led them to the saloon where a heavy-set woman with graying hair took one look at the bedraggled group and immediately started barking orders. Hot coffee appeared. Blankets were draped over shoulders. The sobbing woman was ushered into a back room to have her arm looked at. Ella sank into a chair near the fire, grateful for the warmth. Her hands trembled as she wrapped them around the tin cup of coffee someone handed her. She took a sip and nearly choked. It was strong enough to strip paint, but it helped. "You all right, miss?" She looked up. A man stood beside her, maybe 40, with a neatly trimmed beard and an expensive-looking coat. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm fine," Ella said. "Just cold." "Understandable. That was quite an ordeal." He extended a hand. "Ephraim Briggs. I own the general store here in Dusty Ford." She shook his hand, noting the softness of his palm. "Ella Hart." "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Hart. What brings you to our little town?" "I'm the new school teacher." His eyebrows lifted. "Are you now? Well, that's wonderful news. We've been without a teacher for nearly 6 months. The children will be thrilled." Ella managed a small smile. "I hope so." Briggs glanced toward the window where rain still lashed against the glass. "You'll want to rest tonight. I'll make sure you have a room at the boarding house. Tomorrow, I can show you the schoolhouse and introduce you to some of the families." "That's very kind of you." "Not at all. We take care of our own here in Dusty Ford." There was something about the way he said it, smooth, practiced, that made Ella uneasy, but she was too tired to think much of it. She nodded her thanks and turned back to the fire. As the evening wore on, the other passengers gradually dispersed. The driver went off to find someone to help retrieve the coach. The woman with the injured arm was put to bed upstairs. The boy was claimed by a worried-looking couple who'd been waiting for him. Eventually, Ella found herself alone in the saloon, except for the bartender, a wiry man who wiped down the counter with slow, methodical strokes. "Rough day," he said, without looking up. "You could say that. You're the teacher, right?" "Word travels fast." He shrugged. "Small town. Not much happens here that doesn't get noticed." Ella wondered if that was a warning or just an observation. She finished her coffee and set the cup down. Is there a boarding house nearby? 2 doors down. Mrs. Calloway runs it. Briggs probably already paid for your room. He did. The bartender nodded. He's good at that, making sure people feel taken care of. There was an edge to his tone that Ella couldn't quite place. She decided not to push. Instead, she stood, wrapping the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Thank you for the coffee. Any time. Outside, the rain had softened to a drizzle. Ella made her way down the muddy street, past darkened storefronts and a few scattered lanterns. The boarding house was easy to spot, a 2-story building with a painted sign and a lamp glowing in the front window. Mrs. Calloway turned out to be a thin woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She handed Ella a key without preamble and pointed her toward the stairs. 2nd floor, 3rd door on the right. Breakfast is at 7. Don't be late. Thank you. The room was small but clean. A narrow bed, a washstand, a single chair by the window. Ella closed the door behind her and leaned against it, finally letting herself breathe. Her shoulders still ached. Her ribs were sore. But she was alive. She was here. She peeled off her wet dress and hung it over the chair, then washed her face and hands in the basin. The water was cold, but it felt good. She braided her damp hair and climbed into bed, pulling the thin quilt up to her chin. Sleep should have come easily. She was exhausted, but instead she lay awake, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the stranger in the rain. The way he'd moved, the way he'd looked at her, the way he'd vanished without a word. Who was he? And why did she have the feeling she'd see him again? Morning came too soon. Ella woke to pale light filtering through the window and the sound of voices downstairs. She dressed quickly in her spare dress, plain gray cotton, nothing fancy, and pinned her hair into a simple bun. Her shoulder was stiff, but the pain had dulled to a manageable ache. Downstairs, the dining room was already half full. Mrs. Calloway moved between tables with a coffee pot, refilling cups and ignoring the chatter. Ella found an empty seat near the back and waited. Breakfast was eggs, biscuits, and bacon, simple but filling. She ate slowly, listening to the conversations around her. Most of it was mundane, talk of weather, crops, a broken fence that needed mending. But one name kept coming up, Cole McKinnon. Saw him in town yesterday, a man with a thick mustache said. Didn't say a word to anyone. Never does, another replied. Keeps to himself out at that ranch of his. Heard he pulled some folks out of a wrecked stagecoach. That sounds like him? Shows up, does what needs doing, then disappears. Ella's fork paused halfway to her mouth. The stranger. That was him. You think he's trouble? The first man asked. Hard to say. He's got a past, that's for sure, but he's never caused problems here. Yet. Ella set down her fork and took a sip of coffee, her mind racing. So the stranger had a name, Cole McKinnon, and a reputation, apparently. She filed the information away and finished her breakfast in silence. After the meal, she made her way to the general store as Briggs had suggested. The streets were muddy from the storm, but the sky had cleared, revealing a sharp blue expanse dotted with clouds. The town looked different in daylight, rough around the edges but functional. A blacksmith's forge sent up smoke. A few children chased each other down the road. Life carrying on. Briggs was waiting for her at the store, all smiles and politeness. Miss Hart, good morning. I trust you slept well. Well enough. Thank you again for arranging the room. My pleasure. Now, shall we visit the schoolhouse? They walked together down the main street, Briggs keeping up a steady stream of conversation. He pointed out the church, the bank, the doctor's office. He introduced her to a few of the townsfolk, a blacksmith named Tom, a widow named Mrs. Jensen who ran the bakery, a farmer with 3 children who would be in Ella's class. The schoolhouse sat at the edge of town, a modest building with peeling paint and a sagging porch. Inside, it smelled of dust and old wood. There were rows of desks, a chalkboard, a stove in the corner. It wasn't much, but it was hers. We'll get it cleaned up for you, Briggs said. And if you need supplies, books, slates, anything, just let me know. I'll make sure you have what you need. That's very generous. We want our children to have the best education possible. Ella nodded, though something about his tone still bothered her. It was too smooth, too rehearsed, like he was selling her something she hadn't asked to buy. When do classes start? She asked. Next Monday. That gives you a few days to settle in and prepare. I'll be ready, Briggs smiled. I have no doubt. They spent another hour going over details, schedules, expectations, the names of the families whose children would attend. By the time they finished, Ella's head was spinning, but she was also excited. This was what she'd come here for, a fresh start, a chance to leave the past behind. As they stepped back onto the porch, Briggs paused. One more thing, Miss Hart. If you ever need anything at all, don't hesitate to ask. I consider it my responsibility to look after the people of this town. I appreciate that. Good. He tipped his hat. I'll leave you to it then. Welcome to Dusty Ford. He walked away and Ella stood on the porch for a moment, looking out at the town. It was quiet, peaceful even. But there was something underneath that peace, something she couldn't quite name. A tension, maybe? Or a secret. She shook off the thought and went back inside to start cleaning. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Ella scrubbed floors, washed windows, organized books. The townsfolk were friendly enough, though a few kept their distance. She learned quickly who the key players were. Briggs, who seemed to have his hands in everything. Sheriff Pike, a tall man with a permanent scowl and a badge that looked too shiny to have seen much use. And the bartender, whose name she learned was Sam, and who seemed to know more than he let on. But it was Cole McKinnon who occupied her thoughts more than she wanted to admit. She didn't see him again in those first few days, but she heard his name often enough. He owned a ranch outside town, people said, kept cattle and horses, worked hard, stayed out of trouble. But there was always a pause before they said his name, like they were weighing whether to say more. On the third day, Ella decided to take a walk. She needed air, and the schoolhouse was as clean as it was going to get. She headed east, following a narrow trail that led out of town and into the open grassland beyond. The land here was beautiful in a stark, unforgiving way. Rolling hills stretched to the horizon, dotted with sagebrush and wildflowers. The sky was enormous, impossibly blue. Ella walked until the town was just a smudge behind her, then stopped to catch her breath. That's when she saw him. Cole McKinnon stood about 100 yards away, near a fence line. He was working, mending a post, it looked like, his coat off and his sleeves rolled up. Even from a distance, she could see the controlled precision of his movements. No wasted effort, no hesitation. She should have turned around, should have left him to his work, but instead she found herself walking toward him. He noticed her when she was about 20 feet away. He straightened, wiping his hands on his pants, and watched her approach. His expression was unreadable. "Miss Hart?" he said when she was close enough to hear. "Mr. McKinnon." A pause. "You know my name." "Small town. People talk." "They usually do." Ella stopped a few feet away, suddenly unsure why she'd come. "I wanted to thank you, properly, for helping with the stagecoach." "You already did." "I know, but I meant it." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You're welcome." Another pause, longer this time. Ella glanced at the fence he'd been working on. "Looks like hard work." "It is." "Do you run this place alone?" "Mostly." She waited, hoping he'd say more, but he didn't. The silence stretched between them, not quite comfortable, but not hostile either. "Well," she said finally, "I won't keep you. I just wanted to say thank you." Noted. She turned to go, then hesitated. "If you ever need anything, I won't." It wasn't rude exactly, just firm. Ella nodded and started walking back toward town. She'd made it maybe 10 steps when his voice stopped her. "Miss Hart." She turned. "Be careful in town," he said. "What do you mean?" "Just be careful." He didn't elaborate, just picked up his hammer and went back to work, leaving Ella standing there with more questions than answers. She walked back to town slowly, turning his words over in her mind. Be careful. Of what? Or who? By the time she reached the boarding house, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Ella stood on the porch and looked back toward the open land where, somewhere out there, Cole McKinnon was still working alone. And she realized, with a strange mix of unease and curiosity, that this town had more secrets than she'd bargained for. Monday morning arrived with a crispness that made Ella's breath fog in the air as she walked to the schoolhouse. She'd spent the weekend preparing lesson plans, arranging desks, and trying not to think too much about Cole McKinnon's warning. Be careful. The words had lodged themselves somewhere in the back of her mind, surfacing at odd moments when she was trying to focus on other things. The children started arriving just before 8. They came in small clusters, siblings mostly, holding hands or shoving each other playfully. Ella stood at the door and greeted each one, learning names as quickly as she could. There was Mary Jensen, the baker's daughter, with freckles and braids, the Hartwell boys, twins who looked identical except for a scar on one's chin. A quiet Chinese girl named Lin, who kept her eyes down and stayed close to her older brother. By the time the bell rang, Ella had 14 students ranging from 6 to 13 years old. The first day went smoother than she'd expected. The children were curious, testing boundaries, but not pushing too hard. Ella kept the lessons simple: reading, arithmetic, a bit of geography. When the afternoon sun started slanting through the windows, she dismissed them and watched as they scattered toward home, their voices carrying across the empty street. She was wiping down the chalkboard when the door opened behind her. "Miss Hart?" Ella turned. A woman stood in the doorway, maybe 35, wearing a faded dress and holding a basket covered with a cloth. Her face was kind but tired, lines etched around her eyes. "I'm Sarah Hartwell," the woman said. "My boys are in your class." "Of course, they did well today," Sarah smiled, though it didn't quite erase the weariness. "They can be a handful. I hope they weren't trouble." "Not at all." "Good." Sarah stepped inside, glancing around the room. "I brought you something, just some bread and preserves. Welcome to town, I suppose." She set the basket on Ella's desk. The gesture was simple, but there was something about it that made Ella's throat tighten. Kindness, offered without expectation. "Thank you," Ella said. "That's very thoughtful." Sarah nodded, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Did Ephraim Briggs help you get settled?" Ella's guard went up slightly. "He did. He's been very helpful." "I'm sure he has." Sarah's expression shifted, something careful sliding into place. "Just be mindful. Briggs likes to make himself indispensable. It's not always without strings." It was the second warning in less than a week. Ella studied Sarah's face, trying to read what wasn't being said. "What kind of strings?" Ella asked. Sarah looked toward the window, watching the empty street. "He owns half this town, one way or another. The store, the bank, property, people owe him, and he's got a way of making sure they remember it. I don't owe him anything. Not yet, but he'll work on that." Sarah turned back to her. "I'm not saying don't trust him. I'm just saying watch yourself. Know what you're agreeing to before you agree." Ella nodded slowly. "I appreciate the warning." "Good." Sarah managed another small smile. "My husband works for Briggs at the lumber mill, so I can't say much, but I wanted you to know. You seem like a decent person, and decent people don't always last long here if they're not careful." She left before Ella could ask what that meant. Ella stood alone at the schoolhouse, staring at the basket of bread. The town was starting to feel less like a fresh start and more like a puzzle with pieces she couldn't see yet. She wrapped the bread carefully and locked the door behind her. The walk back to the boarding house took her past the saloon, where a few men sat on the porch drinking. One of them called out a greeting, and Ella nodded politely without stopping. She'd learned quickly that lingering invited conversation she didn't always want. That evening, she sat in her room and tried to write a letter to her sister in Ohio. The pen hovered over the paper for a long time before she finally wrote, "I've arrived safely. The town is small, but the work is good. Don't worry about me." She didn't mention the stagecoach crash, didn't mention Cole McKinnon, or the warnings, or the uneasy feeling that had taken root in her chest. Her sister had enough to worry about. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm. Ella taught during the day, prepared lessons in the evening, and tried to carve out a life that felt normal. The children warmed to her. Parents stopped by occasionally to check on their progress or drop off small gifts, eggs, vegetables, once a hand-sewn apron. Ella began to feel like she might actually belong here. But the tension underneath never quite went away. She noticed things. The way certain families avoided the general store, walking an extra quarter mile to buy supplies from a smaller shop that had less selection. The way Sheriff Pike seemed to spend more time loitering than patrolling, his eyes always watching. The way people's conversations would cut off abruptly when Briggs walked by. And then there was Cole McKinnon. She saw him in town occasionally, though he never stayed long. He'd ride in on a sturdy roan horse, tie up outside the blacksmith or the feed store, conduct his business in silence, and leave. People gave him space, not out of fear exactly, but something close to it. Respect, maybe, or uncertainty. Ella found herself watching for him without meaning to. She told herself it was just curiosity, but that wasn't quite true. There was something about him that felt familiar in a way she couldn't explain, like recognizing a scar you didn't know you had. One afternoon in late October, Ella was walking back from the post office when she saw him outside the blacksmith's shop. He was talking to Tom, the blacksmith, gesturing toward his horse's left front hoof. Tom knelt down to examine it, running his hands along the leg. Ella slowed her pace, close enough to hear, but not close enough to intrude. "Might be a stone bruise," Tom said. "I can shoe her, but she needs rest." "How long?" "Few days at least." Cole nodded, his jaw tight. He didn't look happy about it, but he didn't argue. Tom stood and wiped his hands on his apron. "You can leave her here. I'll take care of it." "Appreciate it." Cole turned to leave and nearly walked straight into Ella. He stopped short, his eyes widening slightly before his expression smoothed back into neutrality. "Miss Hart." "Mr. McKinnon." They stood there for a moment, an awkward standoff on the dusty street. Ella felt heat rise to her cheeks, embarrassed at being caught so obviously lingering. "How's the teaching going?" he asked, which surprised her. He'd never shown interest in small talk before. "It's going well. The children are bright." "That's good." Another pause. Ella searched for something to say that didn't sound ridiculous. "Your horse all right?" she asked. "She will be. Just needs time." "That must be inconvenient." "I've walked farther." He glanced past her toward the edge of town, then back. "You settling in okay?" "I think so." "Good." He shifted his weight, clearly ready to end the conversation, but then hesitated. "You had any trouble?" Ella thought about the warnings, the uneasy feeling, Briggs's too smooth smile. "Not really. Why?" "Just asking. People keep telling me to be careful," Ella said before she could stop herself. "You included, but no one will tell me what I'm supposed to be careful of." Cole's expression darkened slightly. He glanced around, making sure they weren't being overheard. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. "This town has two kinds of people," he said. "The ones who work, and the ones who profit off that work. You figure out which is which, you'll know who to watch." "And which one are you?" His mouth twitched, almost a smile. "I work." "What about Briggs?" "You're smart. You'll figure it out." He tipped his hat and walked away before she could press further. Ella watched him go, frustration and curiosity warring in her chest. Everyone in this town talked in half-sentences and vague warnings. Nobody said anything straight. That night she lay awake listening to the wind rattle the windows. Somewhere out there, Cole McKinnon was walking back to his ranch in the dark. And somewhere closer, Ephraim Briggs was probably counting his money and planning his next move. Ella pulled the quilt tighter and tried not to think about what side of that divide she was supposed to land on. The answer came sooner than she expected. It was a Thursday afternoon, nearly a month after she'd started teaching. Ella had just dismissed the children when Briggs appeared in the doorway, carrying a wooden crate. "Miss Hart," he said warmly, "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all. Classes are done for the day." He set the crate on her desk with a soft thud. "I brought you some new books. Thought the children might enjoy them." Ella opened the crate and found a dozen primers, all in good condition. Geography, history, even a few storybooks. They must have cost a small fortune. "This is very generous," she said, though the familiar unease was back. "Nonsense. It's an investment in the town's future." Briggs leaned against the desk, his posture casual. "I've been hearing good things about your teaching. The parents are impressed." "I'm glad. In fact, I've been thinking." He paused, letting the moment stretch. "There's a dinner at my home this Saturday evening. Just a small gathering of the town's more prominent citizens. I'd be honored if you'd attend." Ella's instinct was to decline, but she hesitated. Refusing outright might cause problems, and she couldn't afford to make enemies here. Not yet. "That's very kind of you," she said carefully. "But I wouldn't want to impose." "You wouldn't be imposing at all. In fact, I insist. His smile widened, but his eyes stayed flat. It would be good for you to meet the people who keep this town running, make connections. There it was, the string Sarah had warned her about. Ella forced herself to smile back. Then I'd be happy to attend. Excellent, 7 o'clock. My house is the large one on the north end of town. You can't miss it. He left shortly after, taking his smooth words and expensive gifts with him. Ella stood in the empty schoolhouse, staring at the crate of books and feeling like she'd just agreed to something she didn't fully understand. Saturday came too quickly. Ella dressed in her best dress, a dark blue one with minimal trim, and pinned her hair up carefully. She looked at herself in the small mirror above the washstand and barely recognized the woman staring back. When had she started looking so tired? Briggs's house was exactly as he'd described. Large, well-maintained, ostentatious in a town where most people lived in 1 or 2 rooms. A housekeeper answered the door and led Ella to a dining room where 6 people were already seated. Briggs stood immediately. "Miss Hart, welcome. Please, sit." He introduced her to the others. Sheriff Pike, who nodded curtly. A man named Davis, who owned the bank. A couple named Morrison, who ran the hotel. And a woman named Constance, Briggs's sister, who had sharp eyes and a sharper smile. Dinner was elaborate. Roast beef, potatoes, vegetables, fresh bread. The conversation flowed easily, touching on town gossip, business prospects, the upcoming winter. Ella mostly listened, answering questions when asked but otherwise staying quiet. It wasn't until dessert that the real purpose of the evening became clear. "We've been discussing expansion," Briggs said, setting down his fork. "The town is growing, and we need to grow with it. More businesses, more infrastructure. A proper school building, for instance." Ella's attention sharpened. The current schoolhouse seems adequate. For now, perhaps. But imagine what we could do with a real building. 2 rooms, proper desks, a library. Briggs leaned forward, his enthusiasm seeming genuine. "I'd be willing to fund the construction myself. An investment in the town's future." "That's very generous," Ella said slowly. "Of course, we'd need the right person to run it. Someone educated. Someone the community trusts." He smiled at her. "Someone like you." Ah, there it was. "I'm flattered," Ella said, choosing her words carefully. "But I'm not sure I'm qualified for that kind of responsibility." "Don't sell yourself short. You've already proven yourself capable." Briggs glanced at the others, who all nodded in agreement. And naturally, with increased responsibility would come increased compensation, a proper salary, a house of your own, perhaps. It was a good offer, a smart offer, and it came with a hook buried so deep she could almost feel it sinking in. "I'd need time to think about it," Ella said. Briggs's smile didn't waver. "Of course. Take all the time you need." But the way he said it made clear that refusing wasn't really an option he'd considered. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Ella made polite conversation, thanked Briggs for his hospitality, and left as soon as she could without seeming rude. The walk back to the boarding house was cold, the night air biting through her shawl. She felt trapped. If she accepted Briggs's offer, she'd be beholden to him in ways she couldn't fully predict. But if she refused, she'd make an enemy of the most powerful man in town. Either way, she lost something. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the figure leaning against the side of the boarding house until she was almost at the door. "Rough night?" Ella jumped, her hand flying to her chest. Cole McKinnon stepped out of the shadows, his expression unreadable in the dim light from the street lamp. "You scared me half to death," she said, her heart still racing. "Sorry, didn't mean to." "What are you doing here?" "Saw you heading to Briggs's place earlier. Wanted to make sure you got back all right." Ella stared at him. "You were waiting for me?" Seemed like the right thing to do. She didn't know what to say to that. Part of her wanted to be annoyed at the presumption, but another part, a bigger part, was grateful. "I'm fine," she said finally. "You sure? You look rattled. Briggs offered me a job, running a new school." Cole's jaw tightened. "And you said?" "I said I'd think about it." "Smart." "Is it?" Ella shook her head. "I don't know what the right answer is. If I say yes, I'm in his pocket. If I say no, I'm making an enemy." "You're already in his pocket," Cole said bluntly. "He paid for your room, got you books, made you feel welcome. That's how he works. By the time you realize you owe him, it's too late." Then what do I do? Cole was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. You figure out what you're willing to lose, and then you hold on to it. It wasn't the answer she wanted, but it was honest. Ella wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. Thank you, she said, for waiting. Don't mention it. He turned to leave, then stopped. Miss Hart? If you ever need help, real help, you know where to find me. I thought you said you wouldn't. I lied. He walked away before she could respond, disappearing into the darkness between buildings. Ella stood there for a long moment, her breath fogging in the cold air, before finally going inside. The next 2 weeks were tense. Ella tried to focus on teaching, but Briggs's offer hung over her like a storm cloud. He didn't push, which somehow made it worse. He just smiled and waited, confident that she'd come around. Then one evening, everything changed. Ella was walking home from the schoolhouse when she heard shouting. She followed the sound to the edge of town, where a small crowd had gathered near the telegraph office. Sam, the bartender, stood in the center, arguing with Sheriff Pike. I'm telling you, something's wrong, Sam said, his voice tight. McKinnon was supposed to pick up supplies 2 days ago. He never showed. Maybe he changed his mind, Pike said dismissively. He wouldn't, not without sending word. Then maybe he's busy. Or maybe something happened. Sam's frustration was clear. Someone should ride out there, check on him. Pike's expression hardened. I'm not wasting manpower on a man who's probably just behind on chores. Then I'll go myself. You do that. The crowd dispersed slowly, muttering. Ella stayed where she was, her mind racing. Something's wrong. The words echoed Cole's warning from weeks ago. Be careful. She found Sam outside the saloon an hour later, saddling a horse. You're really going? She asked. He glanced at her, surprised. Someone has to. Let me come with you. No offense, Miss Hart, but this isn't a Sunday ride. I know, but if something's wrong, you might need help. Sam studied her for a moment, then shrugged. Your funeral, can you ride? Well enough. He found her a horse, an older mare with a calm temperament, and they set out as the sun began to set. The ride to McKinnon's ranch took nearly an hour, the trail winding through open grassland that turned gold in the fading light. When they crested the final hill, Ella's breath caught. Smoke. Not the light smoke of a cooking fire, but thick, dark columns rising from multiple points. Sam swore and kicked his horse into a gallop. Ella followed, her heart pounding. The ranch came into view, a small house, a barn, a few outbuildings, or what was left of them. The barn was fully engulfed, flames licking at the sky. The house was damaged, one wall blackened and partially collapsed. And in the yard, bodies. No, not bodies. Men, hurt but alive. Sam dismounted and ran toward them. Ella followed, her hand shaking. There were 3 men, all on the ground. One was unconscious, blood matting his hair. Another clutched his arm, his face pale. And the third, Cole McKinnon, looked up as they approached. His face was bruised, a cut above his eye still bleeding. But he was upright, trying to get to his feet despite the obvious pain. What happened? Sam demanded. Raiders, Cole said, his voice rough. Came at sundown yesterday. We held them off, but... He gestured at the destruction. How many? 6, maybe 7. Pike needs to know about this. Cole's laugh was bitter. Pike knows. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Sam's expression shifted, understanding dawning. You're saying... I'm not saying anything. Cole finally made it to his feet, swaying slightly. I'm saying help me get my men inside before they bleed out. Between the 3 of them, they managed to move the injured men into what remained of the house. Ella tore strips from her petticoat to make bandages, her hands steady despite her racing heart. Cole directed them with clipped efficiency, his own injuries apparently forgotten. It took hours. By the time they'd done what they could, the moon was high and the barn had burned down to smoldering embers. Ella sat on the porch steps, exhausted and covered in soot and blood. Sam came out and sat beside her. You did good, he said. Will they be all right? Probably. The worst one might lose his arm, but he'll live. Ella looked toward the ruins of the barn. Why would anyone do this? You'd have to ask them. Sam, he sighed. McKinnon's land sits on the best water access for 50 miles. Briggs has been trying to buy it for years. Cole won't sell. The pieces clicked into place. So Briggs sent men to force him out. I didn't say that, but that's what you're thinking. Sam didn't answer. He didn't need to. Cole emerged from the house, moving stiffly. He looked at Ella, then at Sam. You should go, he said. It's not safe here. We're not leaving you alone, Sam said. I'm not alone. I've got 2 men who can still shoot if it comes to it. Cole, go, please. There was something in his voice, not quite desperation, but close, that made Sam nod reluctantly. They rode back in silence, the night pressing close around them. When they reached town, Ella dismounted and handed the reins back to Sam. Her whole body ached, her dress was ruined, and her mind couldn't stop turning over what she'd seen. Thank you, Sam said, for coming, for helping. I didn't do much. You did more than most would. Ella nodded and walked toward the boarding house. She was halfway there when she remembered the telegraph office. An idea formed, reckless and half-formed, but she couldn't shake it. The telegraph operator was just locking up when she arrived. Miss Hart, bit late for messages. I need to send one. It's urgent. He hesitated, then unlocked the door. Go ahead. Ella stepped inside and scribbled on a piece of paper. Raid on McKinnon Ranch. Multiple injured. Sheriff Pike aware. Request marshal assistance. She signed it and handed it over. The operator read it, his eyebrows rising. You sure about this? Yes? This'll cause trouble. I know. He sent it anyway, the telegraph key clicking in the quiet office. When he finished, he looked at her seriously. You might want to be scarce for a few days. Briggs won't like this. I'll manage. Ella walked back to the boarding house, her heart pounding. She just declared a side in a fight she barely understood. But watching Cole McKinnon try to stand despite broken ribs and a bleeding head, watching him protect his men even when it cost him everything, she couldn't stand by and do nothing. Whatever came next, she'd face it. But she wouldn't be careful anymore. The trouble came faster than Ella expected. She woke the next morning to find Mrs. Calloway standing in her doorway, face pinched tight. Sheriff Pike's downstairs, says he needs to speak with you. Ella's stomach dropped, but she kept her voice steady. Tell him I'll be down in 5 minutes. She dressed quickly, fingers fumbling with the buttons on her gray dress. Her reflection in the mirror showed a woman who looked calm, composed. It was a lie, but a useful one. She pinned her hair up, straightened her shoulders, and went downstairs. Pike stood in the parlor, hat in hand, but there was nothing polite about his posture. 2 other men flanked him, deputies both wearing badges that looked just as new and shiny as Pike's. Miss Hart, Pike said. His voice was flat, official. I understand you rode out to the McKinnon place last night. I did. That was foolish. Could have gotten yourself killed. Mr. McKinnon and his men needed help. Pike's jaw tightened. That's not your concern. You're a school teacher, not a doctor. I'm a person who saw other people bleeding. I did what anyone would do. And then you sent a telegraph to the territorial marshal. Pike took a step closer. That's interfering with official business. Ella met his gaze. What official business? You refused to check on him when Sam asked. Someone had to do something. You had no right. I had every right. This is still a free territory, last I checked. The words came out sharper than she'd intended, but she didn't take them back. Pike's face darkened. One of the deputies shifted his weight, hand drifting toward his gun. You're new here, Miss Hart, Pike said slowly. So I'll give you some advice. Stay out of matters that don't concern you. Focus on your students. Leave law enforcement to those who understand how things work. Is that a threat? It's friendly counsel. It doesn't sound friendly. Pike studied her for a long moment, then settled his hat back on his head. You should be careful who you align yourself with. Cole McKinnon's got a past that'd make your skin crawl. He's not the hero you think he is. I never said he was a hero. I said he was hurt and needed help. Just remember what I told you. Pike turned and left, his deputies following. The front door closed with a heavy thud. Ella stood in the empty parlor, her hands shaking now that the confrontation was over. Mrs. Calloway appeared from the kitchen, drying her hands on her apron. You all right? The older woman asked. Fine. That was brave. Stupid, maybe, but brave. Ella managed a weak smile. I'm not sure there's much difference. She skipped breakfast, her stomach too tight to eat, and walked to the schoolhouse early. The morning air was cold, frost glittering on the grass. The town looked peaceful, almost pretty in the early light. But Ella couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just stepped over a line she couldn't uncross. The children arrived as usual, oblivious to the tension simmering beneath the surface. Ella threw herself into teaching, grateful for the distraction. They practiced arithmetic, read passages from their primers, debated whether rain came from clouds or the sky itself. The twins got into an argument about who was older by 2 minutes, and Mary Jensen asked if they could study butterflies next spring. Normal, safe, simple. But during the lunch break, while the children ate outside, Sarah Hartwell appeared at the door. Her face was drawn, anxious. "I heard about last night," Sarah said without preamble. "Word travels fast." "It always does. Ella, can I call you Ella?" "Of course." Sarah glanced toward the children playing in the yard, then lowered her voice. "You need to be very careful now. Pike works for Briggs. Everyone knows it, but no one says it out loud. And if you've made Pike angry..." "I know. Do you?" "Because people who cross Briggs tend to leave town, or worse." Ella thought about the burned barn, the injured men. "I'm not leaving." "Then watch your back, and don't trust anyone you haven't known for years, not even people who seem friendly." Sarah left before Ella could ask if that included her. The rest of the afternoon dragged. When Ella finally dismissed the children, she locked the schoolhouse door and started toward the boarding house, hyper-aware of every person she passed on the street. Briggs caught up with her near the general store. "Miss Hart," he said, matching her pace. "Lovely afternoon, isn't it?" "Mr. Briggs?" "I heard you had some excitement last night. Quite the adventure." Ella kept walking. "Not by choice. Still, it was brave of you to help. Cole McKinnon's lucky to have such concerned neighbors." His tone was light, conversational, but there was an edge underneath. "Though I do hope you'll be more cautious in the future. The frontier can be dangerous for those who don't understand its complexities." "I'll keep that in mind." "Good. Oh, and about that offer I made. The new school? I don't want to pressure you, but I will need an answer soon. There are other candidates if you're not interested." It was a bluff. Ella knew it was a bluff, but it was also a reminder of how much power he held. "I'll let you know by the end of the week," she said. "Perfect." Briggs tipped his hat and turned back toward his store, whistling softly. Ella made it to her room before the shaking started again. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands pressed against her knees, trying to steady herself. Every instinct screamed at her to pack her things and leave. Catch the next stagecoach out. Start over somewhere else. But she'd already done that once. Running from her past in Ohio, from the scandal that had nearly destroyed her sister's family. She'd promised herself this would be different, that she'd stand her ground, even if standing her ground got her killed. That night, she barely slept. Every creak of the old building made her jump. She kept seeing Cole McKinnon's bruised face, hearing Pike's flat threats. When dawn finally came, she dragged herself out of bed and prepared for another day of pretending everything was fine. The answer to the telegraph came 3 days later. Ella was in the schoolhouse helping Lynn practice her English when Sam burst through the door. His face was flushed, eyes bright with something that might have been excitement or fear. "The marshal's coming," he said. "Gets in tomorrow morning." Ella's heart jumped. "Did the telegraph say anything else?" "Just that he's investigating the raid. Wants to talk to witnesses." Sam grinned, but it was tight around the edges. "You kicked the hornet's nest good this time." "Is Cole all right?" "Haven't seen him since that night, but I heard his men are recovering. The one who got hit worst is going to keep his arm after all." That was something, at least. Ella dismissed Lynn gently and turned to Sam. "What happens when the marshal gets here?" "Depends on what he finds. If he thinks Pike's dirty, he could remove him, bring in someone from outside to investigate." "And if he doesn't?" Sam's expression sobered. "Then things get worse for everyone who spoke against him." Ella swallowed hard. "I see. You could still back out. Say you were confused, didn't see what you thought you saw. Is that what you're going to do?" "Hell no, but I'm a bartender with nothing to lose. You've got a career here, a future." "Not if I lie about this." Sam studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You've got spine. I'll give you that. Just hope it's enough." He left, and Ella finished the school day in a fog. The children sensed something was wrong and were quieter than usual. When she dismissed them, they scattered quickly, eager to escape the strange tension in the air. Ella locked up and walked toward the boarding house. But halfway there, she changed direction. Her feet carried her east, out of town, following the trail she'd walked weeks ago. The sun was setting, painting the grassland in shades of orange and red. She didn't have a clear destination. She just needed to move, to think, to breathe. She was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't notice the rider until he was almost beside her. Cole McKinnon pulled his horse to a stop, his expression unreadable. He looked better than he had 3 nights ago. The cut above his eye was healing, the swelling on his face had gone down. But he still moved carefully, like his ribs hurt. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said. Ella stopped walking. "Neither should you." "I'm armed." He gestured to the rifle strapped to his saddle. "That's comforting." Cole dismounted, wincing slightly. He led the horse by the reins, falling into step beside her. They walked in silence for a minute before he spoke again. "I heard what you did. The telegraph. I'm sorry if I overstepped." "Don't apologize. It was the right move." He paused. "Dangerous as hell, but right. Everyone keeps telling me how dangerous everything is. I'm starting to wonder if there's anything safe left." "Not much." Cole's voice was dry. "But you already knew that." Ella glanced at him. "Pike came to see me, warned me off." "He would." "He said you have a past, that I shouldn't trust you." Cole's jaw tightened. "He's not wrong. About which part?" "Both, probably." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Look, Miss Hart." "Ella." He blinked. "What?" "My name's Ella. You've pulled me out of a wrecked stagecoach and bled on my makeshift bandages. I think we're past formalities." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "Ella, then. You should know what you're getting into. Pike wasn't lying when he said, 'I've got history.'" "What kind of history?" Cole looked away, toward the darkening horizon. "The kind that follows you no matter how far you run. I was a different person before I came here. Did things I'm not proud of, hurt people who didn't deserve it." "In the war?" "After." He was quiet for a moment. "There was a man. A boss, I guess you'd call him. He ran operations in Kansas. Theft, intimidation, worse. I worked for him for 2 years before I figured out what I was really part of. By then I was in too deep to just walk away." Ella listened, not interrupting. "I got out eventually," Cole continued, testified against him. "Put him and half his crew in prison. But the other half, they didn't forget. They've been looking for me ever since." "Is that why you're out here? Hiding?" "Trying to. Bought the ranch under a different name, kept my head down. It worked for a while." His voice went hard. "Then Briggs started sniffing around, wanted my land, wouldn't take no for an answer. And Pike's got connections. I think he figured out who I really am, or at least that I'm running from something. So the raid could have been Briggs trying to scare me off. Could have been someone from my past finally catching up. Could have been both." Cole looked at her. "Point is, being around me is dangerous. You should have left me in that barn to burn." "I don't believe that." "You should." Ella shook her head. "You could have run again. When the raid happened, you could have taken your men and disappeared, but you stayed. You're still here. That means something. Or it means I'm too stubborn to know when to quit." "Maybe. But I don't think so." They stood there as the last light faded from the sky. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of grass and distant rain. Cole's horse stamped impatiently. "The marshal gets here tomorrow," Ella said. "I know. Will you talk to him?" "Don't have much choice. He'll want to see the ranch, the damage, hear what happened." Cole's expression was grim. "Question is whether Pike gets to him first." "What do you mean?" "Pike's had 3 days to shape the story. Make me look like the problem. Say I provoked the attack, or that it was just a dispute between ranchers that got out of hand. If the marshal believes him, then we tell him the truth. Your truth against Pike's word? Against Briggs's money?" Cole shook his head. "That's not a fight you can win." "So we just give up?" "I didn't say that." Ella studied his face in the gathering darkness. "Then what are you saying?" Cole was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, careful. "I'm saying, be ready for things to get worse before they get better. And if it comes down to it, if Pike or Briggs come after you, you run. You hear me? You don't try to be brave, you just run. I'm not good at running. Learn. He mounted his horse in one smooth motion, despite the obvious pain it caused. Get back to town before it's full dark. And Ella? Yes? Thank you. For the telegraph. For helping my men, for... He stopped, seeming to search for words. For not looking at me like I'm already dead. He rode off before she could respond, disappearing into the twilight. Ella stood alone on the empty trail, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. She walked back to town slowly, thinking about everything Cole had told her, about the past that followed him, about the danger that surrounded them both now. She should have been terrified, should have been packing her bags. Instead, she felt something closer to resolve. The marshal arrived at 9 the next morning on a mud-splattered horse, looking tired and irritated. He was older than Ella expected, maybe 50, with gray in his beard and eyes that missed nothing. His name was William Garrett, and he didn't waste time on pleasantries. Pike met him at the edge of town, all false smiles and cooperation. Ella watched from the schoolhouse window as they talked, Pike gesturing broadly, playing the concerned lawman. Garrett's face stayed neutral, giving nothing away. An hour later, a deputy came to the schoolhouse. Marshall wants to talk to you, Miss Hart. Says you witnessed the aftermath of the raid. Ella dismissed the children early and followed the deputy to the saloon, where Garrett had set up a makeshift office. Sam was there, along with Tom the blacksmith, and a few others who'd helped that night. Cole sat in the corner, arms crossed, face carefully blank. Garrett gestured for Ella to sit. Miss Hart, I understand you were one of the first people to reach the McKinnon Ranch after the attack. I was. Sam and I rode out together. Tell me what you saw. Ella described everything, the smoke, the burning barn, the injured men, Cole's condition. She kept her voice steady, factual. Garrett took notes, occasionally asking for clarification. And what was Mr. McKinnon's explanation for the attack? Garrett asked. He said raiders. 6 or 7 men. They came at sundown. Did he identify any of them? He didn't say. Garrett made another note, then looked at Cole. That true? Yes, sir. You didn't recognize any of the attackers? Cole hesitated just a fraction of a second. It was dark. They wore bandanas. But you have suspicions. I have suspicions about a lot of things. Doesn't make them facts. Garrett's eyes narrowed. Mr. McKinnon, I've been doing this job for 20 years. I know when someone's holding back. If you know who did this, I know what I saw. Armed men attacking my property. That's all I can testify to. The tension in the room thickened. Garrett drummed his fingers on the table, thinking. Finally, he turned to Pike, who stood near the door trying to look unconcerned. Sheriff, what's your investigation shown so far? Pike cleared his throat. Well, Marshal, it's a complicated situation. McKinnon's had disputes with some of the other ranchers in the area. Boundary lines, water rights, that sort of thing. It's possible one of them decided to settle things the hard way. You have evidence of that? Not hard evidence, no, but there's been talk. Talk. Garrett's tone was flat. I need more than talk, Sheriff. I understand that, sir, but without witnesses willing to identify the attackers, or maybe, Sam interrupted from across the room, you haven't been looking very hard. Pike's face went red. You want to be careful what you're implying, Sam. I'm not implying anything. I'm saying it straight. You've done damn near nothing since the raid happened. That's not true. Really? Because I asked you to check on Cole 2 days before the attack. You refused. Then when it happens, you don't ride out until the next afternoon. What kind of law enforcement is that? Garrett held up a hand. Gentlemen, let's keep this civil. He looked at Pike. Is that accurate, Sheriff? You delayed responding to the scene? Pike's jaw worked. I had other responsibilities. And like I said, McKinnon's got a history of... What history? Garrett asked sharply. The room went silent. Pike seemed to realize he'd stepped into dangerous territory. Just that he keeps to himself, doesn't interact much with the community, makes people wonder. Wonder about what? About who he really is. Cole's hands tightened on his arms, but his expression stayed neutral. Garrett studied him for a long moment. Mr. McKinnon, is there something I should know about your background? The question hung in the air. Ella held her breath. This was it. The moment Cole could either lie or expose himself completely. My background's my own business, Cole said quietly. Unless you're charging me with something. I'm not. Yet. But if you're withholding information relevant to this investigation, I'm not. Garrett didn't look convinced, but he didn't push. Instead, he turned back to Ella. Miss Hart, in your observation, did Mr. McKinnon seem like he'd provoked this attack? Was he acting guilty or defensive? No, Ella said firmly. He was trying to keep his men alive. That's all. And you have no personal relationship with Mr. McKinnon that might bias your testimony. The question caught her off guard. No, we barely know each other. Then why ride out there in the middle of the night? Because Sam was going alone and it seemed dangerous. And because someone needed help. Garrett made another note. Very civic-minded of you. There was something in his tone that made Ella's skin prickle. Like he didn't quite believe her. Or maybe like he believed her but thought she was foolish. The interviews continued for another hour. Garrett questioned everyone who'd been at the ranch that night, taking notes and asking pointed questions. But by the end, Ella could see the frustration on his face. Without witnesses who could identify the raiders, without physical evidence linking them to anyone specific, there wasn't much he could do. Finally, Garrett stood. I'll be riding out to the McKinnon Ranch to see the damage myself. Sheriff Pike, you'll accompany me. Pike looked like he'd swallowed something sour, but he nodded. Of course, Marshal. Mr. McKinnon, you're welcome to join us. Show me exactly what happened. Cole stood. I can do that. As the room emptied, Ella found herself standing near the door with Sam. The bartender looked worried. That didn't go the way we hoped, he said quietly. No. Garrett's not stupid, but he's also not going to stick his neck out without proof. And proof is something we don't have. So what happens now? Sam glanced toward where Pike and Garrett were talking outside. Now, we wait, and we watch our backs. Ella spent the rest of the day in a state of nervous tension. She tried to teach, but her mind kept wandering. The children noticed and grew restless. Finally, she gave them free reading time and sat at her desk, staring at nothing. When Cole, Garrett, and Pike rode back into town late that afternoon, Ella was standing outside the schoolhouse. She watched them dismount at the sheriff's office, trying to read their body language. Garrett looked thoughtful. Pike looked smug. Cole looked exhausted. That evening, Sam found her at the boarding house. Garrett's leaving in the morning, says there's not enough evidence to pursue charges against anyone. Ella's heart sank. That's it? That's it. He told Pike to keep investigating, but we both know that's not going to happen. Sam's expression was grim. We tried, but Briggs has too much cover, too much money, too many people on his side. So he just gets away with it. For now. Ella wanted to throw something, wanted to scream. Instead, she just nodded stiffly. Thank you for letting me know. Sam left, and Ella sat in her room as darkness fell. She'd done everything she could think of, sent the telegraph, given testimony, told the truth. And it hadn't been enough. She was still sitting there when she heard the commotion outside. Shouting, the sound of horses. Ella went to the window and looked out. In the street below, a group of riders, maybe 8 or 10, were gathered outside the saloon. Even in the dim light from the street lamps, she could see they were armed. Her blood went cold. She grabbed her shawl and ran downstairs. Mrs. Calloway was already at the front door, peering out nervously. What's happening? Ella asked. Don't know. But it doesn't look good. Ella pushed past her and stepped outside. The riders were arguing with someone. She couldn't see who at first. Then the crowd shifted and she saw Cole McKinnon standing in the middle of the street, facing them alone. You've got one more chance, the lead rider was saying. His voice was rough, unfamiliar. Sell to Briggs, or we burn what's left. I'm not selling, Cole said. His voice was calm, but Ella could see the tension in his shoulders. Then you're a dead man. The rider's hand moved toward his gun. Ella didn't think. She just moved, striding into the street before anyone could stop her. That's enough, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. Everyone turned to stare at her. The lead rider looked her up and down, amused. This doesn't concern you, lady. I'm making it my concern. You're threatening a man in the middle of town in front of witnesses. Marshal Garrett's still at the hotel. Want me to go get him? The marshal's leaving in the morning. Won't matter what he hears tonight. Maybe. But it'll matter to the territorial governor when I write him a letter detailing everything that's happened here. every threat, every attack, every corrupt sheriff and bought lawman. Ella took another step forward, her heart hammering but her voice steady. You want to kill Mr. McKinnon? You'll have to kill me too, and then explain to the authorities why a school teacher ended up dead in your little land dispute. The writer's amusement faded. You're bluffing. Try me. For a long, terrible moment, nobody moved. Ella could feel Cole's eyes on her, could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. The writer's hand hovered near his gun. Then, from behind Ella, other voices rose. She's right. Sam stepped out of the saloon, shotgun in hand. This has gone far enough. Tom the blacksmith appeared from his shop. I'm with them. Sarah Hartwell emerged from the shadows, holding her husband's rifle awkwardly but determined. One by one, townspeople appeared. Not everyone. Not even most. But enough. The lead writer looked around, calculating. Then he spat in the dirt. This isn't over. He wheeled his horse around and the others followed, thundering out of town in a cloud of dust. The street fell silent except for the sound of hoofbeats fading into the distance. Ella's legs went weak. She would have fallen if Cole hadn't caught her arm. That, he said quietly, was the stupidest, bravest thing I've ever seen. I wasn't thinking. Clearly. Sam came over, still holding his shotgun. They'll be back, and next time they won't come to town to do it. Cole nodded grimly. I know. So what do we do? Ella asked. Cole looked at her, something shifting behind his eyes. We set a trap. They gathered in the back room of the saloon an hour later. Cole, Sam, Tom, Sarah, and her husband John, and Ella. The space was cramped, lit by a single lamp that cast long shadows on the walls. Sam locked the door and pulled the curtains closed. All right, Sam said, setting his shotgun on the table. Let's hear this plan. Cole leaned against the wall, arms crossed. He looked tired, the bruises on his face dark in the lamplight. We know they're coming back, question is when and how, so we make it easy for them, give them a target they can't resist. Your ranch, Tom said. Right, but this time we're ready. We set up positions in what's left of the barn, in the house, behind the fence line. When they come, we're waiting. John Hartwell frowned. That's an ambush. We're not soldiers. No, we're not. But we're out of options. Pike won't help. The marshal's gone. If we don't stop this now, Briggs will keep sending men until someone's dead. Someone might end up dead anyway, John said. Probably us. Maybe. But I'd rather go down fighting than watch them burn everything I've built. Ella had been quiet, listening. Now she spoke up. How do we know when they're coming? They could attack tomorrow or next week. Cole's jaw tightened. That's where it gets tricky. We need bait. Something that makes them move fast before they can plan too carefully. Like what? Sam asked. A message. We make them think I'm leaving, selling out, packing up, make it look like they won. Then they'll come to celebrate, let their guard down. And who's going to deliver this message? Sarah asked. Cole looked at Ella. She felt her stomach drop. No, Sam said immediately. Absolutely not. It has to be her, Cole said. Briggs trusts her. Or at least he thinks he does. If Ella goes to him, says she talked me into selling, he'll believe it. He wants to believe she's on his side. You're asking her to walk into the lion's den, Sam said. I'm asking her to help end this. Cole's gaze was steady on Ella. But it's her choice. I won't force it. Everyone turned to look at her. Ella's mind raced. It was dangerous, maybe suicidal. If Briggs suspected she was lying, if he saw through the deception. But if they did nothing, more people would get hurt. Cole would lose everything, and Briggs would keep tightening his grip on the town until there was nothing left but fear and silence. I'll do it, Ella said. Ella, Sam started. I'll do it, she repeated more firmly. But we do this smart. I don't just walk in and tell him. That'll seem suspicious. I need a reason to be there, something that makes sense. Cole nodded slowly. What are you thinking? The school, the offer he made me. I go to him, say I've thought it over. I want to accept. But I'm worried about the violence in town. I mentioned that I spoke to you, tried to convince you that selling was the safest option for everyone. Make it seem like I'm trying to protect my investment. Tom whistled low. That's actually not bad. It's risky, John said. Everything's risky now, Ella replied. At least this way we control some of it. They spent the next hour working through details. Ella would visit Briggs the following afternoon, after school. She'd accept his offer, express concern about the instability, mention her conversation with Cole. Meanwhile, Cole and the others would prepare the ranch, setting up positions and supplies. If everything went according to plan, Briggs would send his men within a day or two. They'd be expecting an abandoned property, easy pickings. Instead, they'd walk into a fight. There were 100 ways it could go wrong. Ella tried not to think about most of them. When they finally dispersed near midnight, Cole walked Ella back to the boarding house. The streets were empty, the town dark and quiet. Their footsteps echoed on the wooden sidewalk. "You don't have to do this," Cole said. "Yes, I do." "Why? This isn't your fight." Ella stopped walking and turned to face him. "Isn't it? I live here now. These people are my neighbors, my students' families. If I run every time things get hard, I'll spend my whole life running. There's running and then there's common sense. And which one is staying on a ranch waiting to be attacked?" Cole's mouth quirked slightly. "Fair point." They started walking again. Ella pulled her shawl tighter against the cold. "Can I ask you something?" "Depends on the question." "Earlier, when the marshal was interviewing everyone, Pike mentioned your past. Like he knew something specific. Does he?" Cole was quiet for several steps. "Probably. He's got connections in Kansas, and that's where I was before. Wouldn't be hard for him to dig up my real name, find out what I did." "And what did you do?" "Exactly. I told you. Worked for a man who ran illegal operations. Theft mostly, but worse things too. I helped coordinate shipments, kept records, made sure people paid what they owed." "How did you get out?" "I made a deal. Testified against my boss in exchange for immunity. Figured it was better than hanging." His voice went hard. "But immunity doesn't mean forgiveness. The men who didn't get caught, they put a price on my head. $500 to whoever brings them proof I'm dead." Ella's breath caught. "That's why you're so careful." "That's why I should have left the moment Briggs started circling, but I was stupid enough to think I could build something here. Put down roots. Turns out roots just make you easier to find." They'd reached the boarding house. Ella stopped at the bottom of the steps, looking up at him. "You're not stupid. And you deserve to have a home. Everyone does. Not everyone has bounty hunters tracking them. So we deal with the bounty hunters, and Briggs, and Pike, and whoever else comes." Ella surprised herself with the conviction in her voice. "You're not alone in this anymore." Cole stared at her, something unreadable crossing his face. "You really believe that?" "I do." "You're either very brave or very naive. Can't I be both?" That earned her an actual smile, small but genuine. "I suppose you can." He tipped his hat and turned to leave. Ella watched him walk away into the darkness, then climbed the steps to her room. She didn't sleep much that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the lead rider's hand moving toward his gun, heard the click of hammers being cocked. But she also saw the townspeople stepping forward, standing beside her. Not everyone. Not even most. But enough. Maybe enough was all they needed. The next day crawled by. Ella taught geography and spelling, her mind only half present. The children sensed her distraction and grew rowdy. Mary Jensen knocked over an inkwell. The twins got into a shoving match, and Lynn spent most of the afternoon staring out the window instead of practicing her letters. By the time Ella dismissed them, her head was pounding. She changed into her better dress, the dark blue one she'd worn to Briggs's dinner, and pinned her hair carefully. She looked at herself in the small mirror and saw a woman who looked calm, composed, professional. The lie was getting easier. Briggs's store was busy when she arrived. She waited near the fabric section, pretending to examine bolts of cloth while he finished with other customers. When the store finally emptied, he approached with his usual smooth smile. "Miss Hart, what a pleasant surprise. Mr. Briggs, do you have a moment? I'd like to discuss your offer." His smile widened. "Of course, please. Come to my office." She followed him to a small room at the back of the store. It was neat, organized, with a desk covered in ledgers and invoices. Briggs gestured to a chair and sat across from her. "I'm glad you've reconsidered," he said. "I think you'll find the position very rewarding." "I hope so, though I'll admit recent events have me concerned." "Recent events?" "The violence, the raid on Mr. McKinnon's ranch, the confrontation last night. It's unsettling." Briggs's expression turned sympathetic. "I understand completely. These frontier towns can be rough around the edges, but I assure you such incidents are rare. Are they? Because it seems like tensions are escalating. Growing pains, Miss Hart, nothing more. Once certain, obstacles are removed, things will settle down. Ella forced herself to look troubled. I actually spoke with Mr. McKinnon yesterday. Tried to convince him that selling his property might be the wisest course, for everyone's safety. Briggs's attention sharpened. Did you now? And what did he say? He was resistant at first, but I think I may have gotten through to him. He mentioned he was tired of fighting, that maybe it was time to move on. Really? Briggs leaned back in his chair, studying her. That's quite a change of heart. I think the raid frightened him more than he wanted to admit, and the fact that the marshal couldn't help, it made him realize how alone he is out there. Yes, I imagine it did. Briggs drummed his fingers on the desk. Did he say when he might be willing to discuss terms? He didn't give a specific timeline, but soon, I think. He seemed defeated. Ella watched Briggs's face carefully. She could see him processing the information, weighing whether to believe it. His eyes were calculating, sharp. For a terrible moment, she thought he'd see through her completely. Then he smiled. Well, that is good news. If McKinnon is finally seeing reason, perhaps we can put this unpleasantness behind us. I hope so. As do I. In fact, he pulled out a piece of paper and began writing. Here's a contract for the teaching position. Take your time reviewing it, but I'd appreciate an answer within the week. Ella took the paper, glancing at the terms. The salary was generous, more than she'd expected. Almost too generous. This is very fair, she said. I believe in compensating people properly for their work, and I believe you'll do excellent work, Miss Hart. There was weight behind the words, an unspoken expectation. Ella folded the contract carefully. I'll look this over and get back to you. Wonderful. Oh, and Miss Hart, thank you for talking sense into McKinnon. It's refreshing to meet someone who understands that cooperation benefits everyone. Ella managed a smile and left before her mask could slip. She walked quickly back to the boarding house, her heart racing. It had worked. He'd believed her, or at least he wanted to believe her badly enough not to question too closely. She found Cole waiting in the alley behind the building. He stepped out of the shadows as she approached. Well, he asked. He bought it. Started talking about how things will settle down once obstacles are removed. I think he'll send men soon. How soon? A day or two, maybe? He's eager. Cole nodded, his jaw tight. Then we don't have much time. I'm heading back to the ranch now to finish preparations. Sam and the others will come out tomorrow night, take up positions before dawn. What do you need me to do? Stay in town. Act normal. If anything changes, if you hear anything, send word through Sam. That's it? I just wait? You've done enough, Ella. More than enough. The rest is up to us. She wanted to argue, to insist on being there, but she knew he was right. Her part was played. Showing up at the ranch now would only raise suspicions. Be careful, she said. Always am. That's a lie. Cole's mouth twitched. Yeah, it is. He hesitated, then reached out and squeezed her hand briefly. His palm was rough, calloused. If this goes bad, if things don't work out, I want you to know I appreciate what you did, all of it. Don't talk like that. Just being realistic. Well, stop it. You're going to be fine. He didn't argue, just nodded and disappeared back into the shadows. Ella stood in the alley for a long moment, her hand still warm from his touch. The next day and a half were torture. Ella taught, ate, slept, all while her mind churned with worst-case scenarios. She kept expecting news, kept watching for riders or smoke on the horizon. But the town stayed quiet, almost unnaturally so. Sam was tense too. She saw him cleaning his shotgun 3 times in one afternoon, checking and rechecking the ammunition. Other townspeople who knew what was happening moved with the same nervous energy. Sarah brought her children to school but lingered too long at drop-off, her eyes worried. Tom closed his shop early and headed east toward the ranch. On the second evening, just as the sun was setting, a rider came tearing into town. It was one of Cole's men, the younger one who'd been injured in the raid. His arm was still bandaged, but he rode hard, his face flushed. He went straight to the saloon. Ella saw him from her window and ran downstairs, reaching Sam's place just as the young man was gasping out his message. They're coming, 20 men, maybe more. Saw them gathering 2 miles south. Sam swore. When? Maybe an hour, maybe less. Is Cole ready? As ready as we can be. But 20 men, that's more than we expected. Sam grabbed his shotgun and a box of shells. Then we better get moving. I'm coming, Ella said. The hell you are. I can shoot. Can you? Sam looked skeptical. My father taught me. I'm not expert, but I won't shoot my own foot off. Sam hesitated, then cursed again. Fine, but you stay in the house, you hear me? No heroics. They took 3 horses, Sam's, the messenger's, and one borrowed from the stable. Ella rode poorly, bouncing in the saddle, but she held on. The ride to the ranch seemed to take forever and no time at all. By the time they arrived, full dark had fallen. The ranch looked empty, abandoned. The barn was still a burned-out shell. The house showed damage from the previous raid, but Ella knew there were men positioned all around, in the house, behind the ruined barn walls, in the small shed to the east, waiting. Cole met them at the door. He looked surprised to see Ella, then resigned. You shouldn't be here. Too late now. He didn't waste time arguing. Sam, you take the northwest window upstairs. You, he said to the messenger, help John behind the barn. Ella? He pulled her inside. You stay in the back room. There's a rifle there, already loaded. If anyone gets into the house who isn't us, you shoot. Understand? Yes. And Ella, if this goes completely to hell, you run. Out the back, into the trees. Don't stop until you hit the creek, then follow it north to the old trapper's cabin. You can hide there. I'm not leaving you. You will if I tell you to. His voice was hard, no room for argument. Promise me. Ella swallowed. I promise. He nodded and led her to a small room at the back of the house. True to his word, a rifle leaned against the wall. He checked it quickly, then handed it to her. You know how to use this? Point and pull the trigger, right? More or less. He showed her how to aim, how to work the lever action. His hands were steady, patient. You'll be fine. Just remember, wait until they're close. Don't waste shots. Then he was gone, moving to his own position. Ella sat on the floor in the dark room, the rifle across her lap, and listened to the silence. It stretched. Minutes felt like hours. Her hands started to cramp from holding the gun too tight. She forced herself to relax, to breathe. Then in the distance, she heard it. Hoofbeats, many of them. The sound grew louder, closer. Ella's heart hammered against her ribs. Through a crack in the door, she could see Sam upstairs, crouched by the window. His face was set, calm. The hoofbeats stopped, replaced by voices. Men shouting to each other, confident and careless. See? Empty. Told you he ran. Check the house anyway. What for? Probably took anything worth taking. Just do it. Footsteps on the porch. The front door crashed open. Ella pressed herself against the wall, hardly breathing. Through the crack, she saw a man enter, tall, wearing a bandana over his face. He had a torch in one hand, a pistol in the other. Nobody home, he called back. Let's burn it and go. That's when Cole spoke, his voice cutting through the darkness. I wouldn't do that if I were you. The man spun, raising his pistol, but he was too slow. Gunfire erupted from multiple positions, the windows, the barn ruins, the shed. The torch carrier went down. Outside, chaos exploded. Men screamed, horses panicked, more guns fired. Ella stayed frozen in the back room, her rifle ready but unused. She could see flashes of light through the windows, hear the sharp crack of rifles, and the deeper boom of shotguns. Someone was yelling orders, trying to organize a retreat. More footsteps pounded across the porch. 2 men burst through the door. One was bleeding from his shoulder. The other had a rifle and was firing wildly toward the upper floor. Ella saw Sam duck back from the window. The bleeding man spotted the back room, started toward it. Ella raised her rifle, her hand shaking. Stop! He didn't stop. Came right at her, drawing a knife. She fired without thinking. The recoil slammed her shoulder, the sound deafening in the small space. The man staggered, but didn't go down. She worked the lever action like Cole had shown her, fired again. This time he fell. The other man spun toward her. Ella tried to chamber another round, but her hands were shaking too badly. The man raised his rifle, a gunshot. He jerked and fell. Behind him, Cole stood in the doorway, smoking pistol in hand. His eyes met Ella's. "You all right?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Stay down." He moved back toward the front. The gunfire was lessening now, fewer shots, longer pauses between them. Someone outside was shouting for retreat. Horses thundered away. Then silence, broken only by groans and the crackle of a dropped torch setting the porch on fire. "Fire!" Sam yelled. "The porch is going up!" Men scrambled. Ella dropped the rifle and ran out. The front porch was engulfed, flames spreading fast. Cole and Tom were already throwing dirt on it, trying to smother the worst of it. Ella grabbed a bucket from the well and started hauling water. Her shoulder screamed where the rifle had kicked. Her hands blistered on the rough rope. But she kept going. It took 20 minutes to get the fire under control. By then, everyone was coughing, covered in soot and ash. The porch was destroyed, part of the front wall charred. But the house still stood. Outside, bodies littered the yard. Some were dead. Others were wounded, groaning. Cole moved among them, checking, kicking weapons away. Sam helped, his shotgun ready. "Count?" Cole asked. "6 down? Maybe 4 more wounded out there in the grass. The rest ran." "Prisoners?" "3 that can talk. 2 are too far gone." Cole's jaw tightened. He looked toward town, toward where the survivors had fled. "They'll be back. Or they'll tell Pike we were ready. Either way." A gunshot cracked from the darkness. Cole jerked backward, hand going to his side. Blood spread across his shirt. "Sniper!" Sam shouted. "Get down!" Everyone scattered. Another shot hit the dirt near Ella's feet. She dove behind the water trough, her heart in her throat. Where was Cole? She couldn't see him. Tom fired toward the tree line, working his rifle fast. The sniper returned fire, hitting the wall above Tom's head. This wasn't part of the raid. This was someone who'd stayed behind, waited for the chaos to die down. Ella crawled toward where she'd seen Cole fall. He was on the ground near the porch steps, one hand pressed to his side, the other holding his pistol. His face was pale, tight with pain. "How bad?" she asked. "Bad enough?" He tried to sit up and hissed. "Bastards in the big oak, east side." "I'll get Sam." "No time." Cole's eyes met hers. "Can you shoot?" "I just killed a man, so yes, apparently." "Good. Take my rifle. It's zeroed for 200 yards. See that oak?" Ella looked. She could barely make out the tree in the darkness. "I see it." "Third branch from the bottom, left side. That's where he is. He's got high ground, but he's got to expose himself to shoot. Wait for the muzzle flash, then aim just left of it. Can you do that?" "I don't know." "Ella, can you do it?" She grabbed his rifle. It was heavier than the one she'd used before, the wood smooth under her hands. She crawled to the corner of the water trough and settled the barrel on the edge. "Wait for it," Cole said. His voice was getting weaker. "Don't rush." Ella waited. Her heart pounded. Her hands shook. "Come on, show yourself. Flash!" The sniper fired at Sam. Ella swung the rifle left of the flash and pulled the trigger. The recoil bruised her shoulder again. She worked the action and fired twice more, bracketing the position. A cry. Something heavy fell from the tree, crashing through branches. Then silence. "Got him!" Tom called from across the yard. Ella dropped the rifle and scrambled to Cole. He was slumped against the steps now, his breathing shallow. Sam reached them a moment later. "How bad?" Sam asked. Cole tried to answer but couldn't. Sam pulled his hand away from the wound and swore. "We need to get him inside, get that bleeding stopped." Between them, they half-carried Cole into the house. Sarah appeared from somewhere, already tearing cloth into bandages. She'd brought her medical kit, the one she used when her boys got hurt on the farm. "On the table," she ordered. Gently. They laid Cole down. He was barely conscious now, his skin gray. Sarah cut away his shirt and examined the wound. Ella forced herself to look. It was high on his left side, bleeding steadily. Sarah pressed a wad of cloth against it. "Bullet's still in there," she said. "We need a doctor." "Closest one is in Dawson," Sam said. "That's half a day's ride. Then someone better ride fast." Tom volunteered and left at a gallop. The rest of them worked to keep Cole alive. Sarah knew more than Ella expected, how to pack a wound, how to watch for signs of shock, how to keep someone breathing when they wanted to give up. They worked through the night, taking turns keeping pressure on the wound, forcing water between Cole's lips, talking to him even when he didn't respond. Ella stayed by his head, holding his hand. It was cold, clammy. She talked about nothing, about her students, about the weather, about how angry she was that he'd gotten shot. Anything to fill the silence. "You're not allowed to die," she told him at one point. "You hear me? We went through too much trouble setting this up. You don't get to quit now." His fingers twitched in hers. She took it as agreement. Dawn came slowly, gray and cold. The bodies outside needed dealing with. Sam and John went out to check them, identify who could be saved and who was already gone. They found Sheriff Pike among the dead. "Must have been part of the raid," Sam said when he came back inside. "Took a bullet to the chest." Ella felt nothing. She should have felt something. Shock, horror, satisfaction. But there was just numbness. One more piece removed from the board. The doctor arrived mid-morning, writing hard. He was an older man with steady hands and a no-nonsense attitude. He examined Cole, asked sharp questions, then started working. Sarah helped, passing instruments and holding Cole down when the doctor had to probe for the bullet. Ella couldn't watch. She went outside and sat on what remained of the porch. The yard looked like a battlefield. Scorch marks, bloodstains, abandoned weapons. 3 prisoners sat under guard, hands tied. They looked young, scared. Not the hardened criminals she'd imagined. Tom came and sat beside her. "You did good last night. I killed 2 people. You saved a lot more. Does that make it even?" Tom didn't answer. They sat in silence, watching the sun climb higher. The doctor emerged an hour later, wiping his hands on a rag. "Got the bullet. He's stable, but it's going to be touch and go for the next few days. Wounds clean, but infection's always a risk." "Can he be moved?" Sam asked. "Not for at least a week, maybe 2. Then we stay here, guard him until he can ride." The doctor nodded. "I'll check back in 3 days. Keep the wound clean, change the dressing twice daily, watch for fever. If he starts getting delirious, send for me immediately." He left instructions and departed. Sam organized watch rotations, someone always awake, always armed. Sarah stayed to help with the nursing. The prisoners were loaded onto horses and taken to town under guard. Someone would have to figure out what to do with them eventually, but that was tomorrow's problem. Ella stayed. She told herself it was to help Sarah, to share the nursing duties. But really, she just couldn't leave. Not while Cole was still unconscious, still fighting. He woke the second night, confused and in pain. Ella was sitting beside him when his eyes opened. "Where?" He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. "Don't move. You were shot. Doctor got the bullet out, but you need to rest." Cole's eyes focused on her. "The raid? We won. Pike's dead. Half his men are dead or captured. The rest ran. Casualties on our side? A few injuries, nothing serious. You got the worst of it." He relaxed slightly. "Briggs? Wasn't there. Sent his men to do the work, like always. Smart. Not smart enough. We have witnesses now. 3 prisoners willing to talk if it means avoiding the noose." Cole closed his eyes. "Good. Get some rest. We'll figure out the rest later." "Ella?" "Yes?" "Thank you. For the shot. The sniper. You're welcome. Now sleep." He did, his breathing evening out. Ella sat watching him, her mind finally quiet. They'd won. Not cleanly, not without cost. But they'd won. And somehow, against all odds, they were both still alive. The week after the raid felt like living in a held breath. Cole improved slowly, each day bringing a little more color to his face, a little more strength to his movements. But infection was still a threat, and the doctor's warnings hung over them all like a storm cloud that wouldn't break. Ella stayed at the ranch, helping Sarah with the nursing and the cooking. She sent word to town that she was ill, unable to teach, and asked Mrs. Jensen to watch the children for a few days. It was a thin excuse, but no one questioned it. The whole town knew something had happened out at the McKinnon place, even if the details were fuzzy. On the 3rd morning, Cole was awake and arguing. "I need to get up," he said, trying to push himself into a sitting position. Sarah pressed him back down with one firm hand. "You need to stay put before you tear those stitches and bleed all over my clean bandages. I've been lying here for 3 days. 2.5, and you were shot, in case you forgot." "I didn't forget. I can feel it every time I breathe." "Then maybe that's your body telling you to rest." Cole glared at her, but he stayed down. Ella hid a smile. Sarah Hartwell was half his size, but twice as stubborn, and she wasn't about to let a grown man act like a fool just because he was bored. Later that afternoon, when Sarah had gone to check on the prisoners being held in the barn, Ella brought Cole some broth. He eyed it suspiciously. "What is that?" "Food. It looks like dishwater." "It's broth. The doctor said light foods until your stomach settles." "My stomach's fine." "Your stomach took a bullet 2 inches from it. Drink the broth." Cole grumbled, but took the cup. He sipped it slowly, making a face. "Tastes like dishwater, too." "You're welcome." They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, Ella could hear Sam and Tom working on the porch repairs, their hammers ringing in steady rhythm. The burned section had been torn out completely. They were rebuilding from scratch. "What's happening in town?" Cole asked finally. "Briggs has gone quiet. After Pike's body turned up, he locked himself in his house, won't see anyone. He knows we have witnesses." "He knows. And he knows those witnesses are talking. Sam's been taking statements, writing everything down, names, dates, who ordered what. It's damning." Cole set down the cup. "Damning's not the same as prosecutable. Briggs is smart. He'll have kept himself insulated, made sure nothing traces back to him directly. Maybe. But even if we can't prove he ordered the raids, we can prove Pike did. And Pike worked for him. That's enough to destroy his reputation, even if it doesn't put him in prison. Reputation's all he's got. Without that, he's just another merchant in a dying town." Ella studied his face. "You sound almost sorry for him." "I'm not. But I understand him. He built something here, same as I'm trying to do. Difference is, he built it on other people's backs. That kind of foundation always crumbles eventually." It was the most philosophical she'd heard him get. Ella wanted to push further, ask more, but Cole's eyes were already drifting closed. The broth sat half-finished on the bedside table. She pulled the blanket up over his shoulders and left him to sleep. The real reckoning came 4 days later, when Cole was finally strong enough to sit up without turning gray. Sam rode out with news that the territorial judge was coming to Dusty Ford. Word of Pike's death and the raid had reached the capital, and the governor wanted answers. The trial would be held in 10 days. "Trial of who?" Cole asked. "Everyone involved. The prisoners we took, Briggs, anyone else we can tie to this mess." Sam's expression was grim. "But that includes you." Cole nodded slowly. "I figured. The judge is going to want to know why 20 men showed up at your ranch looking for a fight. That means your past comes out, all of it." "I know." Ella, standing in the doorway, felt her stomach twist. "Can't we just say it was about the land? That Briggs wanted Cole gone?" "We can say that," Sam replied. "And it's true. But the judge will dig deeper. He'll want to know why Briggs was so determined, why Cole wouldn't sell. And once he starts asking questions..." He shrugged. "Kansas isn't that far away. Someone will recognize the name." Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Ella. "You should distance yourself from this. From me. Before it all comes out." "No." "Ella, I said no. Whatever happened in Kansas, whatever you did before you came here, it doesn't change what happened last week. You were defending your home. We all were. The law might not see it that way. Then the law's wrong." Sam coughed, breaking the tension. "For what it's worth, I agree with her. But you should both know what you're walking into. This isn't going to be clean." He left shortly after, heading back to town to help prepare for the judge's arrival. Ella stayed with Cole, helping him walk around the room for the first time since the shooting. He was weak, shaky, but determined. By the end of the day, he could make it from the bed to the chair without assistance. Progress. Small, hard-won, but real. The night before the trial, Ella couldn't sleep. She sat on the repaired porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. The night was clear and cold, the kind of cold that made everything feel sharp and immediate. Cole found her there an hour before dawn. He moved slowly, one hand pressed to his side, but he was walking on his own now. "You should be resting," Ella said. "So should you." He sat beside her, lowering himself carefully. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind move through the grass. "I've been thinking about what happens after," Cole said finally. "After the trial?" "After everything. If I'm not in prison or dead." He smiled slightly. "Big if, I know, but assuming." "What about it?" "I'm tired of running. Tired of looking over my shoulder. Even if I win this trial, even if Briggs goes down and my name stays clean, there's still Kansas, still the bounty, still people who want me dead. Ella's throat tightened. So what are you saying? I'm saying maybe it's time to stop running, face what I did, make peace with it, even if that means going back. Going back to Kansas, that's suicide. Maybe, or maybe it's the only way forward. Cole turned to look at her. I can't build anything real here. Can't have a life. If I'm always waiting for the past to catch up. So I either run forever or I turn around and deal with it. There has to be another option. If there is, I haven't found it. Ella wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that there was always another way. But she knew better. She'd tried running from her own past, and it had followed her here anyway. Maybe Cole was right. Maybe the only way through was straight ahead. Then I'll go with you, she said. Cole shook his head. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. If you're going back to Kansas, you're not going alone. Ella, I mean it. You stood by me when Pike came after me, when Briggs tried to buy me off. You didn't have to, but you did. So don't ask me to abandon you now. Cole stared at her, something complicated moving behind his eyes. You're the stubbornest woman I've ever met. I'll take that as a compliment. It wasn't meant as one. But there was warmth in his voice, and when his hand found hers on the porch boards, she didn't pull away. They sat together until the sun rose, painting the grassland gold and red. Then they went inside to prepare for whatever came next. The trial was held in the town hall, a drafty building that usually hosted dances and town meetings. Every seat was filled, people packed in shoulder to shoulder. Ella sat in the front row with Sarah, Tom, and Sam. Cole sat at the defendant's table with a lawyer who'd come up from Helena, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret Ross, who'd agreed to take his case for half her usual fee. The judge was an older man with white hair and a face like carved granite. His name was Henry Walton, and according to Sam, he had a reputation for being fair but merciless. He banged his gavel, and the room fell silent. We're here to determine what happened at the McKinnon Ranch on the night of November 7th, Walton said, and to assign culpability for the deaths and damages that resulted. Mr. McKinnon, you're charged with manslaughter and reckless endangerment. How do you plead? Not guilty, Your Honor. Very well. Prosecution, proceed. The prosecutor was a thin man named Eldridge, who worked for the territorial government. He laid out the case methodically: the dead men, the property damage, Cole's refusal to sell his land. He called witnesses who testified that Cole was difficult, standoffish, unwilling to cooperate with the community. He painted a picture of a man who'd brought violence down on himself through sheer stubbornness. It was effective. Ella watched the jury, 12 men from surrounding towns, none from Dusty Ford, and saw doubt settling on their faces. Then it was Margaret Ross's turn. She stood slowly, smoothing her skirt. Your Honor, the prosecution would have you believe that my client provoked this attack through his refusal to sell his property. I'd like to present a different narrative, one where a wealthy merchant used intimidation, violence, and corrupt law enforcement to drive an honest man from his land. And when that didn't work, he sent 20 armed men to finish the job. Eldridge objected. There's no evidence linking Ephraim Briggs to— I have 3 witnesses who will testify otherwise, Ross interrupted, along with written statements from 2 more who are currently in custody. All of them name Briggs as the man who hired them. All of them describe in detail how Sheriff Pike coordinated the raids at Briggs's direction. The room erupted. Walton banged his gavel. Order! Ms. Ross, call your first witness. She called the prisoners, one by one. They were young, scared, and faced with the very real possibility of hanging. They talked. They named names, described meetings, outlined payment structures. By the time the third one finished, the connection between Briggs and the raids was undeniable. Eldridge tried to discredit them, but it was weak. The details were too specific, too consistent. Then Ross called Sam, who testified about the confrontation in town, about Briggs's threats, about Pike's refusal to investigate the first raid. She called Tom, who described the damage to Cole's property and the obvious premeditation of the attacks. She called Sarah, who treated the wounded and could speak to the severity of the violence. Finally, she called Ella. Ella walked to the witness stand on shaky legs. The room felt enormous, all those eyes watching her. Walton asked her to state her name and occupation. Ella Hart, schoolteacher. Miss Hart, How did you become involved in this situation? Ella took a breath and told the story. The stagecoach crash, her arrival in Dusty Ford, Briggs's efforts to recruit her, the warnings from Cole and others. She described the night of the first raid, riding out with Sam to find the ranch burning. She described sending the telegraph to the marshal, confronting Briggs, standing in the street when the riders came to threaten Cole. And why did you do that? Ross asked. Why risk yourself for a man you barely knew? Ella looked at Cole. He was watching her, his expression unreadable. Because it was the right thing to do, she said simply. Because someone had to stand up. Because if we don't protect each other, if we don't fight for what's right even when it's hard, then what's the point of any of this? What's the point of building towns and schools and lives if we're going to let bullies and cowards tear them down? The room was silent. Ross smiled slightly. No further questions. Eldridge stood for cross-examination. Miss Hart, you've painted a very sympathetic picture of Mr. McKinnon, but isn't it true that you don't actually know much about his past? About who he was before he came to Dusty Ford? I know who he is now. But you don't know about Kansas, do you? About the criminal organization he was part of, the people he hurt? Margaret Ross shot to her feet. Objection! Mr. McKinnon is not on trial for his past actions in Kansas. Those matters were resolved through testimony and immunity agreements years ago. Walton frowned. Where's this going, Mr. Eldridge? Your Honor, I'm establishing that the witness's judgment may be compromised by incomplete information. I'll allow it, but tread carefully. Eldridge turned back to Ella. Miss Hart, were you aware that Cole McKinnon, or rather Cole Brennan, his real name, worked for one of the most violent criminal enterprises in Kansas? That he participated in theft, extortion, and worse? Ella's heart pounded. I knew he had a past. He told me himself. Did he tell you that 3 men died during operations he helped coordinate? He told me he did things he wasn't proud of. That he testified against his former boss and got immunity in exchange. That he's been trying to build a new life ever since. And you believe him? I do. Why? Ella looked at Eldridge directly. Because I've seen what kind of man he is when everything's on the line. I've seen him protect his people, even when it cost him everything. I've seen him choose the hard right over the easy wrong. Whatever he did in Kansas, and I'm not saying it was right, he's not that man anymore. People change. They grow. They deserve second chances. Eldridge smiled thinly. Very noble, Miss Hart, but second chances don't erase first mistakes. No, they don't. But they give us the opportunity to make better ones. She was dismissed. As she walked back to her seat, she caught Cole's eye. He mouthed 2 words. Thank you. The trial continued for 2 more days. Briggs was called to the stand and he denied everything, claimed the prisoners were lying to save themselves. Said Pike had been acting independently, pursuing some personal vendetta. It was polished, convincing, backed by expensive lawyers. But the evidence was too strong. The testimonies too detailed. And when Margaret Ross produced bank records showing payments from Briggs's accounts to several of the dead raiders, records that Sam had quietly obtained from a clerk who owed him a favor, the case collapsed. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood and read the verdict. On the charge of manslaughter, we find the defendant, Cole McKinnon, not guilty. Relief flooded through Ella so strongly she almost couldn't breathe. Cole's shoulders dropped, tension bleeding out of him. On the charges against Ephraim Briggs, conspiracy to commit assault, conspiracy to commit arson, accessory to murder, we find the defendant guilty on all counts. The room erupted again. Briggs's face went white. His lawyers immediately began calling for appeals, for mistrials, for anything that might save him. But Walton was unmoved. Mr. Briggs, you are remanded to territorial custody pending sentencing. Sheriff, he paused, remembering Pike was dead. Marshal Garrett, please take the prisoner. Garrett, who'd returned for the trial, stepped forward with 2 deputies. They led Briggs out in chains. He didn't look at anyone, his eyes fixed straight ahead. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Some cheered. Others stood silent, processing what this meant. Briggs had been the most powerful man in Dusty Ford for years. His fall left a vacuum that would take time to fill. Cole emerged with Margaret Ross shaking her hand gratefully. She smiled and said something Ella couldn't hear, then departed. Cole looked around, spotted Ella, and walked over. We won, he said. We did. I'm not sure I believe it yet. Me neither. Sam appeared with a bottle of whiskey he'd liberated from the saloon. Celebrating's happening whether you two are ready or not. Come on. They ended up back at the saloon. The whole town, it seemed, packed inside. People wanted to buy cold drinks, shake his hand, apologize for doubting him. He handled it with awkward grace, clearly uncomfortable with the attention, but grateful for the support. Ella found Sarah near the bar. The other woman was smiling, genuine happiness on her tired face. Your husband's here, Ella noticed. John Hartwell stood nearby, talking to Tom. He quit Briggs' lumber mill 3 days ago, Sarah said. Told them to find someone else to exploit. We'll figure out the money somehow, but at least he can sleep at night now. I'm glad. Me too. Sarah clinked her glass against Ella's. To standing up, even when it's terrifying. To standing up, Ella echoed. The celebration went late into the night. Eventually, Ella slipped outside for some air. The street was quiet. The noise from the saloon muffled behind closed doors. She sat on the bench outside and tipped her head back, looking at the stars. Cole found her there 10 minutes later. He sat beside her, moving more easily now. The stitches were healing well. You all right? He asked. Just thinking. About? About what comes next. Briggs is gone, Pike is dead, the town's safe. But you said you were planning to go back to Kansas. Is that still… No, Cole interrupted. I was wrong about that. Ella looked at him, surprised. What changed? You did. What you said at the trial, about second chances, about choosing to be better. I realized I've been so focused on my past that I forgot I could actually have a future. Here, if I want it. Do you want it? Cole turned to face her fully. I want to rebuild the ranch, make it something real. Maybe expand, hire more hands, actually be part of this community instead of hiding from it. That sounds good. And I want… He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. I want you to be part of it, if you're willing. Ella's heart did something complicated. In what capacity? Whatever capacity you want. Friend, partner, more than that if… He shook his head. I'm not good at this. Words aren't my strength, but what I'm trying to say is, I care about you, more than I probably should, and if there's any chance you feel the same… Ella kissed him. It was impulsive, probably improper, definitely not something a schoolteacher should do in the middle of the street. But she didn't care. She'd spent too much of her life being careful, being proper, following rules that only seemed to protect people who didn't need protecting. Cole froze for half a second, then kissed her back. His hand came up to cup her face, gentle, despite the calluses. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. So, Cole said, I'm going to take that as a yes? Ella laughed. You idiot. Yes. They sat together on the bench, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. The night was cold, but neither of them moved to go inside. What about the school? Cole asked. You're still teaching, right? Of course. Though I might need to hire an assistant. The town's growing, and one teacher won't be enough for long. And Briggs's offer? The new building? I'll build it myself. Well, with help. Sam's handy with a hammer, and Tom can do the metalwork. It won't be as fancy as what Briggs promised, but it'll be ours. No strings attached. Cole smiled. I like that plan. Good, because you're helping with the construction. I figured. They fell quiet again. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The wind carried the smell of grass and distant rain. Ella closed her eyes and just breathed, letting herself feel safe for the first time in months. The next few weeks transformed the town. Briggs's properties were seized and sold, the money distributed to people he'd cheated over the years. A new sheriff was appointed, a fair-minded man from Great Falls who'd served in the army and didn't owe anyone favors. Slowly, carefully, Dusty Ford started to rebuild itself into something better. Cole hired 2 ranch hands and began serious repairs on his property. The barn was reconstructed, bigger than before. Fences were mended, cattle were purchased, water systems were improved. It was hard work, the kind that left everyone exhausted and sore, but there was satisfaction in it. Purpose. Ella threw herself into the school project. She organized fundraisers, collected donations, and personally supervised the construction. The building went up slowly, just one large room at first, with plans to add another later. But it had real desks, real books, and windows that let in light. When it opened in early spring, twice as many children showed up as the old schoolhouse had held. She hired Lynn's older brother as her assistant. He was patient with the younger students and had a gift for mathematics. Together, they created something that felt less like an institution and more like a community. Cole and Ella saw each other often, though they were careful to maintain some propriety. This was still a small town, and reputations mattered. But on Sundays, Cole would ride into town and they'd walk together, talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes Sam or Sarah would join them. Sometimes they'd be alone. One Sunday in March, they rode out to the creek where Cole had told Ella to hide if things went wrong during the raid. It was a beautiful spot, sheltered by cottonwood trees with clear water running over smooth stones. They sat on the bank, their horses grazing nearby. Cole had brought a basket of food, bread, cheese, apples. They ate in comfortable silence, listening to the water. "I've been thinking about Kansas," Cole said eventually. Ella's stomach tightened. "And?" "I wrote to the prosecutor who handled my case, asked about the bounty, whether it was still active. Got a response last week." "What did he say?" "Said the man who put it out died 2 years ago. Pneumonia. His organization fell apart without him. The bounty's gone." Relief washed through Ella. "So you're free. Looks like it. For real this time." Cole smiled, but there was something sad in it. "I spent 5 years running from something that doesn't exist anymore. 5 years looking over my shoulder, afraid to put down roots. All that time wasted." "Not wasted," Ella said firmly. "It brought you here. To this place, these people, to—" She stopped, suddenly shy. "To you," Cole finished. "Yeah, I suppose it did." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Ella's breath caught. "I'm not good at speeches," Cole said, "and I can't promise you an easy life. The ranch is hard work. The winters are brutal, and I'm still figuring out how to be part of a community after years of hiding. But I can promise you honesty, loyalty, a partner who'll stand beside you no matter what comes." He opened the box. Inside was a simple silver band with a small stone. Not a diamond, but something that caught the light and held it. "Ella Hart, will you marry me?" Ella looked at the ring, at Cole's face, at the creek flowing past them toward some distant destination. She thought about the stagecoach crash, the warnings, the raids, the moments of terror and the moments of unexpected grace, the way this man had saved her without knowing it, and the way she'd saved him right back. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will." Cole slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been made for her. They kissed there by the creek, sealing a promise that had nothing to do with perfection and everything to do with choosing each other, flaws and all. They were married 6 weeks later in the new schoolhouse because it was the biggest building in town and everyone wanted to come. Sarah stood up with Ella. Sam stood up with Cole. The ceremony was simple, the vows traditional. When it was done, they walked out into a spring afternoon where the whole town waited to celebrate. There was food, so much food. Tables groaned under the weight of bread and meat and pies. Someone brought out a fiddle and people danced in the street, children weaving between adults, laughter echoing off the buildings. It wasn't elegant or refined, but it was real. And it was theirs. As the sun set, Ella and Cole slipped away from the party and rode out to the ranch. The house had been repaired, expanded, made into something that could hold a life. Their life. They stood on the porch, looking out over land that had been bought with fear and blood, but was now, finally, home. "Are you happy?" Cole asked. Ella thought about it, about the long road from Ohio, the secret she'd fled, the woman she'd been, and the woman she'd become. About standing in the street facing armed men, about sending that telegraph, about pulling the trigger when it mattered most, about all the small and large ways she'd chosen courage over comfort. "I am," she said. "Are you?" Cole looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, his expression was completely open, unguarded, at peace. "Yeah," he said, "I really am." They went inside together, closing the door on the past and everything it had cost them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There was always work to be done, problems to solve, fears to face, but they'd face them together, and that made all the difference. Because here's what Ella had learned, what the whole brutal, beautiful experience had taught her. Safety isn't something you find by running away or hiding or keeping your head down. It's something you build, piece by piece, with people who'll stand beside you when everything goes to hell. It's choosing to care even when caring is dangerous. It's fighting for what matters, even when the odds are terrible. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, it's finding someone who sees all your scars and broken pieces and loves you not in spite of them, but because they understand that being broken and still standing is its own kind of strength. The ranch thrived over the next year. Cole expanded the herd, improved the breeding stock, and built a reputation for honest dealing that brought buyers from 3 territories. The work was hard, but it was good work, the kind that left a person tired but satisfied at the end of each day. Ella continued teaching, watching her students grow and learn. Lynn blossomed under the attention, her English improving until she could read novels and write essays that made Ella proud. The twins stopped fighting quite so much. Mary Jensen announced she wanted to be a teacher when she grew up, just like Miss Hart. Mrs. McKinnon now, but the children still called her Miss Hart, and Ella didn't correct them. Sarah and John opened a small bakery with money they'd saved. It did well, serving the growing town. Sam expanded the saloon, adding rooms for travelers. Tom took on an apprentice. Slowly, deliberately, Dusty Ford transformed from a place ruled by fear and greed into a community where people took care of each other. It wasn't perfect. There were still arguments, still problems, still people who put their own interests first. But the worst of the corruption was gone, burned away like dead wood in a fire, leaving space for new growth. One evening in late autumn, Ella stood in the schoolhouse after dismissing the children. She was organizing books when she heard footsteps behind her. "Working late?" Cole asked. "Just tidying up. What are you doing here?" "Came to walk you home. Thought we could take the long way, watch the sunset." Ella smiled and took his offered arm. They walked through town, nodding to neighbors, stopping to chat with Sam, who was sweeping the saloon's porch. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and coming winter. "I have news," Ella said as they reached the edge of town. "Good news or bad news?" "Good news, I think. I hope." She stopped walking and turned to face him. "I'm pregnant." Cole stared at her. For a moment he didn't react at all, and Ella felt a flicker of fear. Then his face broke into the widest smile she'd ever seen. "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be. Sarah helped me figure it out. She said all the signs are there." Cole picked her up and spun her around, careful but exuberant. When he set her down, his eyes were bright. "We're having a baby." "We are? When?" "Late spring, Sarah thinks. May or June." Cole pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "I don't know the first thing about being a father." "I don't know the first thing about being a mother. We'll figure it out together." "Together," Cole repeated. I like the sound of that. They walked home slowly, making plans. They'd need to build a cradle, get clothes, prepare a room. There was so much to do, so much to learn. But for once, the future felt like possibility instead of threat. The baby arrived on a warm afternoon in June, during a rainstorm that drummed against the windows and made the whole world feel close and safe. Sarah attended the birth, her steady hands guiding Ella through the pain and terror, and finally, the overwhelming relief of holding a tiny, squalling human against her chest. "It's a girl," Sarah announced, cleaning the baby gently. Cole, who'd been pacing outside, burst through the door. He stopped when he saw Ella holding their daughter, his expression awed. "Can I?" he asked. Ella passed him the bundle carefully. He held her like she might break. This big man who'd faced down raiders and bounty hunters, now completely undone by 8 pounds of angry, red-faced infant. "She's perfect," he whispered. "She's a mess," Ella said, exhausted and exhilarated, "but she's ours." They named her Hope. It felt appropriate, given everything it had taken to get here. Hope McKinnon, born to parents who'd both been running from their pasts until they ran straight into each other and decided to stop. The town celebrated with gifts and visits and more casseroles than 2 people could possibly eat. The school children made cards. Sam carved a wooden rattle. Tom forged a tiny horseshoe for luck. Sarah brought clothes her own children had outgrown and advice Ella desperately needed. Watching the community rally around them, Ella understood something she hadn't quite grasped before. This was what it meant to belong. Not perfection, not comfort, but connection. People who showed up when you needed them, who celebrated your joys and mourned your losses, who fought beside you and forgave your mistakes. She'd spent so long trying to escape her past, trying to become someone new and untouchable. But the truth was, Running didn't make you safe. Standing still did. Planting roots, building relationships, choosing to stay even when staying was hard. Hope grew, as babies do. She learned to smile, to laugh, to grab anything within reach and stuff it in her mouth. Cole proved to be a natural father, patient and gentle, and completely wrapped around his daughter's tiny fingers. Ella juggled teaching and motherhood with Sarah's help and a lot of improvisation. On Hope's first birthday, they held a party at the ranch. The whole town came, or at least it felt like the whole town. Children ran wild in the yard. Adults sat on the porch drinking and talking. The twins presented Hope with a frog they'd caught, which horrified Ella and delighted Cole. Mary Jensen read a story she'd written about a brave princess. Lynn's brother played his harmonica while people danced. As the sun set and the party wound down, Ella found herself standing apart from the crowd, watching. Cole noticed and came to join her. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I almost missed this. All of it. If I'd run when things got hard, if I'd taken Briggs's offer and kept my head down, if I'd left you to fight alone, I would have missed this." Cole wrapped an arm around her waist. "But you didn't." "No, I didn't." Ella leaned into him, watching their daughter sleep in Sarah's arms, watching their friends laugh and talk and belong. "I chose to stay, and it was the best decision I ever made. Even counting the part where you got shot at? Especially counting that part." Cole laughed softly. "You're strange, Ella McKinnon," says the man who married me. Fair point. They stood together as the stars came out, marking the passage of another day in a life they'd built from scratch. It wasn't the life either of them had planned. It was better, messier, harder, richer, real in ways that carefully constructed safety could never be. Years would pass. Hope would grow and eventually have siblings, two boys who inherited their father's quiet strength and their mother's stubborn will. The ranch would prosper. The school would expand again, this time into a proper two-story building with a library. Dusty Ford would become a real town, with a railroad station and 3 churches and enough people that you couldn't know everyone by name. But on that evening, with Hope's first birthday behind them and the whole uncertain future ahead, Ella and Cole simply held each other and were grateful. Not for perfection, because there was no such thing, but for the chance to build something worth keeping. For the courage to stand when running would have been easier. For the people who'd stood beside them. And for each other, these 2 wounded people who'd found each other in the wreckage of a stagecoach crash and decided, against all odds and common sense, that love was worth fighting for. The moon rose over the Montana grassland, painting everything silver. Inside the house, children slept. On the porch, friends lingered over one last drink. And in the middle of it all, 2 people who'd been strangers just a few years ago stood together, no longer running from anything, finally home.